Hello, NIGP colleagues out there. This is David Nash with Radio NIGP, and I'm pleased to be meeting with Mr. Paul Brennan today, who's a former president or past president of NIGP, to ask him a few questions about his career. So, Paul, could you give us a brief rundown on how you got into procurement and where you're working now?
Sure, David. Thank you for having me. I got into public procurement, I think probably a roundabout way that everybody else gets into public procurement. I was in the private sector, mainly in the furniture industry, doing different types of procurement. And my parents were government employees and had let me know about a director purchasing position open at the county, and kept on suggesting that I apply for it, that I'm qualified. At the time, I really didn't want to work for the government. That's what my parents did. But I guess to satisfy my mother, I went ahead and put an application in, and several months after that, I was interviewed, and several months went by, and I was eventually offered the job. And so I started 27 and a half years ago at Rockland County as the director of purchasing, and I'm 27 and a half years at the same agency in the same position.
Okay. And how about your involvement with NIGP? How did that all come about?
My involvement through NIGP really came through my state chapter. I learned about my state chapter, probably really found out about a year after I started my job. And I got involved on the executive board of the state chapter and worked my way up and served in the officer positions as well as the president of my state chapter. And Steve Gordon was president of NIGP at the time, and he had come visit our chapter and saw what we were doing and went back and said, we need to get Paul involved at the national level. And so the next thing I knew, I was on several committees. And then I ran as a regional representative for the NIGP board and served on the board for a total of 15 years before my presidency. And then afterwards, I served as treasurer for a couple of years as well.
Wow, that's quite a bit of time put in there. We appreciate that.
Yes.
Looking back at your time in public procurement, is there one or two things in particular that you wish you would have known before you got into the field?
Sure. I guess the main thing I wish I would have known, certainly my first couple of years at the county were a learning experience, and learning public procurement, but also learning a lot of different categories that I had no experience with. I wish I would have known how helpful public procurement practitioners are to helping out their fellow practitioners. And instead of trying to struggle and recreate the wheel yourself, reach out to those around you in surrounding jurisdictions who may have experience in what you're looking to do. One of the things I've learned is that as a public procurement practitioner, you're probably not going to be asked to procure anything or do anything that someone else hasn't already done somewhere in the country. And by using our listservs and things of that nature, we certainly have the tools to reach out and get a lot of information that can help us.
Yeah, certainly. Networking is very important. Also, looking back at how we did things, let's say 15, 20 years ago, and how they're done now, can you see any changes that have come about, either good or bad, and how we do business these days?
Sure. I think there's been a lot of good changes. When I started in county government, we basically had, no ERP systems or purchasing systems. My purchasing system only recorded the amount on the PO, and if you wanted to look online in the system, you couldn't see what was bought. You had to go get the paper copy. So technology has certainly progressed, and it's probably the number one item that people point to. There's been a positive change in public procurement in terms of the ability to do electronic bidding, proposal evaluation, a whole bunch of items that make us more productive. So that certainly has been a big change. The other thing that's been very helpful is the increase of cooperative contracts and national cooperative contracts. So we have a lot more options to go to than just our own state contracts to look at, or doing a solicitation ourselves. We now have a host of national cooperative contracts that are out there that can be researched to see if they're, best interest of our organization to go ahead and use them. And then the last thing that I think that has changed a lot is that I think politics has become less involved in public procurement. And certainly, there's always those few cases every year where, to the contrary, you see politics can still rear its ugly head in terms of public procurement. But I think overall, politicians have realized that public procurement needs to be an independent function. And there is less politics involved in it today than there was 20 years ago.
Oh, that's very interesting. Well, I certainly appreciate you sitting with us today and answering these questions. And on behalf of NIGP, I certainly thank you for the contributions you've made, especially being president of a chapter and being president nationally.